week 4 of the fantasy baseball season, and here's a few hitters I would look to drop this week. The first guy is Akil Baddoo of the Detroit Tigers. So Baddoo, he was off to a hot start early in the season, but the last couple weeks here, his numbers have dropped off on the season. He's 14 for 54, 4 home runs, 13 RBIs, a stolen base, a 259 batting average, a 281 on base, and 6 runs scored. So right there, that batting average to on base ratio isn't good at all, in my opinion, for Baddoo. So it's either a hit or an out. He rarely draws any walks. And over the last week for him, like I said, the numbers have gone down. 4 for 16 from the plate, 2 RBIs, 1 run scored, 9 strikeouts, a 250 batting average, and a 294 on base percentage. So he was an early season surprise here for the Tigers, but the last couple games and weeks now, his numbers have drastically dropped, and he's already been dropped in 6% of fantasy leagues early on this week. The last few games for him: April 22nd versus Pittsburgh, 2 for 4 with an RBI. April 23rd versus Kansas City, 0 for 2 with 2 strikeouts. April 24th versus the Royals, 0 for 4 with 3 strikeouts. And then last night versus Kansas City in this ball game, 1 for 4 with 2 strikeouts. So his strikeout rate is high. He's not really getting any hits anymore, and I think he's an easy drop this week, and already fantasy managers have dropped him. The second guy is Victor Robles of the Washington Nationals, so the former top prospect, or one of the top prospects, I should say, in this national farm system. He's been struggling the last 2 seasons now. Last season he hit 220, and so far this season, 12 for 56 with 1 RBI, 1 stolen base, 4 runs scored, a 214 batting average, and a 343 on base percentage. So right now, the only positive for him is his on base percentage compared to his batting average, but he's been sitting out a few games as well here and there. Right now, he just can't get on base or get a hit at all, it seems like, his Robles. He only has 2 hits in his last 5 ball games, which isn't good at all. April 21st versus St. Louis, 0 for 2. April 23rd at the Mets, 0 for 3. April 24th at the Mets, he appeared as a pinch hitter, 1 for 1. And then at the Mets on Sunday, April 25th, 1 for 3 in that ball game. So right now, he's not really getting the job done. This national team, they've been struggling the last week and a half now, with a couple guys going down, with Soto going down, Turner getting banged up in the last game. And right now, Robles, he just can't do anything, and fantasy owners have dropped him in 5% of fantasy leagues. And right now, if he's on your roster in 10-team leagues or deeper, I would definitely drop Robles. The next bat is Colin Moran of the Pittsburgh Pirates. So Moran was a recommended ad for a couple weeks here in fantasy baseball, but the last week now, the numbers have really dropped down for Moran, and he's not really producing. He's been dropped in 5% of fantasy leagues so far this week on the season. 21 for 79, 4 home runs, 16 RBIs, 8 runs scored, 266 batting average, and a 330 on base. So the numbers, they're not that bad for Moran, but he's just not producing, like I mentioned. Then he's also got a high strikeout rate, 26 strikeouts so far this season. And last week he went 4 for 22, 3 RBIs, 6 strikeouts, a 182 batting average, and a 194 on base percentage. So Moran, he just can't get out of his own way right now. And right now, he's easily droppable, even though he qualifies at first, second, and third. He's just not getting the job done. The last couple games for him: April 23rd at Minnesota, 0 for 4 with the sombrero, 3 strikeouts. April 24th, 0 for 4 with a strikeout, and then 1 for 3 with an RBI versus Minnesota. So now they open a 2-game set, is Moran and the Pirates, with the Kansas City Royals. But right now, he's been dropped in 5% of fantasy leagues. And we'll see. He's still owned in 58%, but I think that number should be lower. The next hit is Wilson Ramos of the Detroit Tigers. So Wilson Ramos, he got off to a hot start early in the season here, where he got off to the league-leading 6 home runs, is the catcher here for the Tigers. But he's been struggling of late on the season. 16 for 73, 6 home runs, 8 RBIs, 8 runs scored, 219 batting average, and a 260 on base percentage. So right now, it's not really cutting it for Ramos. And over the last week, 4 for 22, a run scored, 182 batting average, and a 182 on base. So he's not really drawing walks. He's just going up there and free swinging as Ramos. And right now, he's been dropped already in 6% of fantasy leagues. And catcher position, there's a lot of crapshoot players over the last few seasons at catcher. And right now, Ramos is one of them. Got off to the hot start, and the last 2 weeks, he just hasn't done anything. And I think he's an easy drop this week. The last few games for Ramos, April 24th versus the Royals, 0 for 3 in that one. April 25th, 1 for 4 versus the Royals. And then he had a pinch hit appearance in yesterday's ball game. 0 for 1 is Ramos. So Ramos, he only has 2 hits in his last 6 ball games here for Detroit. And that's mightily struggling right now. And he's a player I think you could easily get away from right now. And if he gets hot again, you go back out there on the waiver wire and pick him up. But he's been dropped in 6% of leagues, like I mentioned, and he's available in 52% of leagues. And the fifth and final hitter I would look to drop this week's Ian Happ of the Chicago Cubs. So Ian Happ, he was a big-time prospect a few seasons ago for Chicago, but he just never could get anything going really throughout his career. Last season was a mediocre year, 12 home runs, 258 average, but so far this season, he's in a horrible slump, 10 for 69, 1 home run, 1 RBI, 6 runs scored, a 145 batting average, and a 314 on base. So right now, he's hitting way under the Mendoza line, is Ian Happ. And right now, fantasy owners, they've had enough of him, dropped him in 5% of fantasy leagues, and he's only owned in 61% of leagues right now. And even the Cubs versus lefties, they don't really play Happ as much. In the last few games for him, April 24th versus Milwaukee, 1 for 4 with 3 strikeouts. April 25th versus the Brewers, 0 for 3. And then at Atlanta, 0 for 4 last night with 2 strikeouts. So right now, Ian Happ, he's only got 2 hits in his last 7 games, and that's no good for fantasy owners. And that's no good for the Cubs. Even though the Cubs this season, they're a middle-of-the-pack team, right now, I don't think they're going to give Ian Happ that much of a chance if he continues to struggle like this, and they'll go in a different direction in the outfield or wherever he plays, because obviously he qualifies at second, third, and outfield is Happ. So right now the Cubs, they're going to see what they're going to do with him. And right now, if I'm a fantasy owner, I'm dropping him, batting 145. That's pretty bad, so that's a few hitters I would look to drop here in Week 4 of the fantasy baseball season.